When assessing the role of women in African societies, we at times may be a bit overzealous. We highlight the achievements of royal African women and others who attained high status in centralized African states. Although women throughout the African continent achieve various positions in most, if not all, levels of human activity, one question looms. What was life like for the everyday African woman in ancient and medieval Africa? What was the status of the average African woman? What up, African world? It's Home Team here, and welcome back to another video of African history, culture, and worldview. By supporting this channel on Patreon, you're helping in the creation of these videos and contributing to this content. The link to Patreon is in the description box below. Also, stay tuned with a word from my sponsors.
Hello, my name is Howard Dorsey. I'm 54 years old. I'm here to talk about my experience with Herbal Results. I was getting sick, so I went to the doctor. They told me that my blood pressure was high, my cholesterol was borderline or high, so I was very sick. You know, sometimes I thought I was dying at some point. And I ordered a bottle of olive leaf extract. This is how the bottle comes in. And within the first probably week and a half, 2 weeks, I checked my blood pressure and it was back down to normal. It was like 120/80. My cholesterol went down to 125. You know, I definitely believe that olive leaf extract from Herbal Results saved my life. And that's real. I mean, I recommend it to everyone in my family, my friends, and we've seen a lot of results in that manner as well.
Purchase now at herbalresults.net.
The performance of African women as rulers, queen mothers, and royal women is undoubtedly impressive. This history cannot be dismissed due to its frequency in regards to the entire African continental scope. However, when we look at African history in a piecemeal process, the picture seems a bit different. African rulers such as Queen Amanirenas, Queen Nzinga, and Hatshepsut are a rare occurrence. The foundation of African statehood was male-oriented nearly in totality. The occasional queen or queen mother found in Africa cannot account for the collective experience of African women in ancient and medieval times. Before we address the social, political, and economic status of the average woman on the continent, it's important to yet again highlight the diversity of African culture. African people advance patrilineal and matrilineal structures. Gender roles and power relations will sometimes be very different depending on the region, and so we must be able to differentiate and delineate the cultural dynamics as effectively as we can. That being said, this video primarily focuses on the patterns seen in West Africa. However, other regions such as Southeastern Africa and Northeastern Africa will be mentioned as well. An unassailable reality for most women in Africa is that their rights and socio-political power was related to male proximity. Single women and widows were limited in their acquisition of power and had considerably more insecurities than married women or women related to powerful men. In Buganda, for example, titled wives of the king could collect taxes from certain subordinate rulers on behalf of the state. The average Buganda man had to be keenly aware of the status of any given Buganda woman, as she may have proximity to male power. Thus, proximity to male power or other relationships produce opportunities for women to express varying levels of agency. Despite the ubiquitous nature of this cultural phenomenon in many parts of the African continent, the average married woman in ancient Egypt seems to have had a quite different experience. In general, the average woman in ancient Egypt had the right to inherit, own, and control property. But the impressive aspect of this African civilization is the complete autonomy of married women in ancient Egypt. Till now, we have placed no faith in the humorous picture drawn by Herodotus when he averred that in the Egypt of his day, the women did all the trading and marketing, while the men sat at home at the loom. Still less did we believe Diodorus Siculus when he stated that Egyptian husbands promised in their marriage contracts to submit themselves in all things to the power of their wives. We took these for ancient travelers' tales, but our Demotic papyri showed that Herodotus and Diodorus wrote in sober earnest of very sober fact. Nothing is more common among these masses of demotic contracts than to find married women buying and selling lands and houses, lending money on usurious terms, foreclosing mortgages, and even tendering contracts to the state without the smallest reference to their husbands. This level of freedom was not as popular in other parts of Africa. For example, among the married Iyeti women of Nigeria, husbands could not deny their wives land, but he had other, though limited, methods of ensuring she doesn't acquire prime real estate. However, we do see some parallels between ancient Egyptian women and the Iyeti women of Nigeria. Trading and marketing was an important activity for the Iyeti women, as it was in ancient Egypt. Women organized themselves in age groups and contributed in a significant way to the local economy. As was the case with Ga women of Ghana, local marketing activities in pre-colonial Iyeti and generally amongst Isoko people were dominated by women. Women played a significant role in farming activities since ancient times. According to one scholar, farming was the most important occupation in pre-colonial Iyeti society. Christopher Ehret highlights a crucial development in understanding the average woman's role in African civilization. The agricultural revolution is considered by many to be one of the most important periods in human history. Many scholars agree that it helped humans to settle in one area and was the origin of human civilization as we know it. The average Niger-Congo women throughout West and Central Africa, according to Christopher Ehret, was instrumental in that process. Okra was still another quite early crop of Niger-Congo farmers, while the kola nut, a tree crop of the West African rainforest, became important later in the last 3,000 years BCE. The inventors of this agriculture, by the way, were women, who in pre-agricultural eras had borne the chief responsibility for the collecting of wild yams and other wild plant foods. Ancient Egyptian women, according to a Greek observer, were traders and marketers, while the men sat at home at the loom. Interestingly enough, one European observed a similar dynamic amongst the Iyeti women of Nigeria. On the whole, the women seemed to be far more industrious than the men, for whereas the men always contrived to have leisure hours and off days from work, the women seemed to have none. In their best form, the average married woman seems to have been economically astute, contributing in significant ways to the maintenance of civilization. In fact, in many West African societies, women producers and traders were not subordinate to men. Also, non-royal married women could wield political power as well. The average woman organized themselves in councils, a cultural aspect found throughout the African continent. In these age groups or councils, the woman would appoint a spokesperson or head, and she would deliver the needs and concerns to an African council. Women were in full control of their own associations and institutions and had a voice in public affairs. They had trade and craft guilds, and they spoke on matters of taxation and maintenance of public facilities, such as markets, roads, wells, and streams. These woman-controlled councils would inflict sanctions on men if they felt strongly on a matter. They exercised this power in various ways. The Iyeti women in particular would take a man hostage or literally lay a non-violent siege on a man's house. Also, they could decide not to cook for their husbands in collective efforts. These expressions of power certainly got the attention of the male elites. One scholar states that the Iyeti's pre-state political organization was comparable to the dual-sex political systems identified by Okonjo and Amadume among the Igbo of Nigeria. Although our focus was the average woman of West Africa, many women across the continent experience a similar dynamic. However, we can't neglect the nuances and the fact that African culture is not a monolith. Male and female relations weren't perfect, but assuming women had no agency in ancient or medieval Africa would be a fundamental mistake. Well, I'm Allah, guys. If you like these videos and want to help in its continued development, consider supporting the Home Team on Patreon.com. The link is in the description box below. Know thyself, remember your ancestors. Peace.